Oh man, sorry. I forgot. There's a wooden beam. I can see the chickens from where I record, and there's a wooden beam across the back, and I sometimes forget it's there. And the chickens sort of roost on it. They sort of sit on it, but it sometimes makes them look like they're floating. And I just saw a floating chicken and was very concerned.
Much like Thingamajig, the chickens flying, the villains are flying.
Yeah. The chicken repeatedly said that he didn't want to be tethered anymore or whatever. What's the phrase? No longer bound to. I've entered the void. That's it. Oh, that's the name of the episode. Oh, I could have remembered that easier. The chicken repeated a mantra and is now untethered.
Yeah, that's how it goes. That's how it works in these shows.
That is how it works in these shows. Let's do a podcast because this is nothing.
Oh, is this not going before the titles?
I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know, Chris.
Yeah. High quality chicken banter. Roll the titles.
Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar, a show that does not involve any form of chicken banter and never will. And by doing that, I have locked myself into including the first part of this recording. Hello everyone, welcome.
At the very least, it certainly doesn't involve any high quality chicken banter.
It just involves chicken banter. Only the lowest of quality for our listeners, Chris. They expect nothing less at this point. We are, of course, this week discussing the 12th episode of Book 3, Change. That is Enter the Void. And if I didn't just demonstrate my lack of remembering the title of this, yes, I did read that from my notes. This is the episode, for those who don't remember, where basically everyone arrives in the same location, the Northern Air Temple, and it becomes a question of a hostage trade. Zahir wants Korra, and he'll release the Airbenders. They initially make plans to just do a daring rescue of the Airbenders, but Korra says that the safest thing to do and the right thing to do is for her to give herself up. And she agrees to meet Zahir and give herself up, and the rest of them are like, oh, for fuck's sake. I had to bleep that. I've already swore. Damn. You know, can I just say now, we only now have 2 episodes from this season that aren't demonetized. I swear they're going back and demonetizing other ones that they told us were fine. Like they checked again and went, no.
I'll tell you what, I will try and not swear or talk about anything controversial. If you bleep that, let's see how we go. Come on, let's do this, Dan.
Yeah. So we've only got 3 episodes from the current season that haven't been demonetized of the 11 we've recorded. Amazing.
Exactly. But this one will be monetized, baby.
Let's do it. Okay, so at a certain point, I am just going to give up, and we're just going to go back to it, like being very openly, like explicit, because I just don't care enough. Anyway, we'll see. Let's give it a go. We'll see how easy or hard that is to maintain. But yeah, they're all like, Korra, what you doing? What you doing, Korra? She's like, I've agreed to give myself up. They're like, I guess we'll make the best of this. So they formulate a plan to once they have the Airbenders back, do a daring rescue of Korra instead. This all goes sort of tits up pretty quickly, basically, and they all end up having a big old fight, big old dust up. We have sort of 2 to 3 skirmishes happening. We have the initial where the Airbenders are. We have a group going up against Gazan and the other character whose name I always forget, Water Arms Lady, who is Minghua. And then Zahir himself is off with a character whose name I finally learned how to pronounce this week. Shame, too late. With what? How does it? It's Puli, who then in the battle meets what I would describe as one of the most gruesome deaths in this show, which is only 2 weeks after the last most gruesome death in this show. I think, pretty bad. I'd say that is the most. I don't think it gets worse than that. I'll say that. And then Zahir reveals that he can fly, and he flies away, and with Korra, and the Airbenders are still somewhat lost because that was a trick too, because of course it was. And we're left with Korra having been all tied up, and then he talks about getting the poison. It's not looking good for our plucky hero. That's the worst recap I've done this season. I think I'm just tired, but that's okay. How'd you find the episode, Chris?
Well, I just said, can you just talk me through it? Because I was beginning to think if Netflix censored it, but I have. I'll be honest with you, I've just watched The Death for the third time on mute to go, what exactly happened? Because my interpretation, honestly, at first, I don't know if Netflix have censored it, I assume not. My interpretation at first was they just put a metal cage on her to stop her being able to firebend. But now I have realised, of course, that actually she was about to fire off fire. He put the metal over her head, so presumably she sort of set fire to her own head. That's the idea, I assume.
I assume her head exploded. She doesn't do fire, she does explosions.
Yeah, and we see all the black smoke coming from where she was, so I think that is it. I do think it's a really gruesome idea, but to be fair to them, I think it's animated quite subtly. Like, in terms of the actual animation of it, the Earth Queen's death was more brutal, in my opinion.
I think, I think that's right. I think in terms of like how it's visually depicted, the Earth Queen's death is more brutal. But I think in terms of the idea of it, your head exploding because it's encased in metal and it was about to create an explosion itself is not pretty. Like, the images that conjures up are way more gruesome. I think it's that, the mind's eye thing. We've talked about this before. The idea of sometimes the thing you can see in your head is so much worse than what they could have probably depicted on the show. In fact, we talked about this very thing last week where the camera panned away as they were beating up Tenzin, and you heard the noises, and you just sort of knew he was getting his proverbial handed to him. And I think that's like we're in a weird situation where like we've got two very different approaches to a gruesome death, an episode apart. Like it's kind of insane, because when we started this show and we talked at the end of season 1 about the brutality of the murder-suicide, when the guy put the glove over the tank and then electrocuted it and exploded the boat with his brother on it. Like, we're in a weird situation now where we're like, how could that not be the worst thing that happened in this show? And not only that, but there are two things that happen like an episode apart. And I think it's really interesting because obviously having I feel like doing this opened up the world to some degree, because like those Kyoshi books are quite violent. I've only read the first one, but there's a lot of violence and brutality in that. But what I really do think as well is interesting is that the two standing so close to each other really does highlight the different ways something can be brutal. The one of the sort of very visceral, actually showing it, showing the life leaving someone in the way they did with the Earth Queen, versus this sort of implied gore, are two very different approaches, I think. And I found it interesting to see the two, but I find this one to be more brutal, just on the grounds of my mind tends to take it to a more gory place. But I acknowledge that visually, just strictly speaking, what's in the footage is not as, violent or upsetting as what happens to the Earth Queen. But I just think the overall effect is worse, in my opinion.
That's fair. I've realised that I sort of went straight into that. So, sure. In terms of kind of overall, I think there's the odd strange moment. I didn't like the gag where it cuts to where it just felt so bad sitcom when Bolin or Marco, one of them, which one's the comic relief?
You got it right initially. Bolin. It was Bolin.
Bolin. When Bolin's like, "Oh, I really miss the animals. I wonder what they're doing," and then it cuts to them, and they're just like, it's a jump cut to them and they're like fighting each other. I'm like, it just wasn't particularly funny. Like, it didn't make me laugh, and I was like, there really was no point cutting away from the action to do it's that classic, you'll never I'll never set foot in that pub, and then we cut to them and they're in the pub. Like, it's just that.
I'm gonna disagree, Chris. I want a full 12-episode season of Naga, Pabu, and Grandma, and it basically functions like Tom and Jerry. Like, Naga and Pabu are always fighting, and Grandma's always coming in with a rolling pin. Sometimes she's just depicted as legs, would be brilliant. Like in Tom and Jerry.
That would be brilliant. That's not what we got here. Like, what we got here was a random cutaway gag that I just didn't think was that funny. And here's the other bit of it that annoyed me, actually. There was twofold. I had more of a justification. It was really emotional, him getting that scarf. That was a like genuine emotional plot beat, him and getting that scarf. And now it's getting eaten. Like, all right. Okay.
Well, that's why she's mad. They're chewing on the scarf.
Right. Yeah. It's listen, Dan. I suspect part of you agrees with me, and you're doing a little bit here. That's what I suspect.
That's presumptuous. I just think like Chris, you just don't get in the comedy. That's what I think. I think it's funny because it's got emotional relevance. The scarf means much to Grandma, and these two things are chewing on it and playing tug of war with it. Cheeky things.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I didn't think of it like that. Fool me.
Yeah. I just think, I think jokes you have to explain are way better. No. I definitely don't mind it. I'm not going to actively actually defend it outside of that joke of just being the guy that has the counter opinion for no reason. I think I see what you mean. It didn't bother me very much because it's such a quick gag. It's inoffensive in the sense of it takes up so little time of the episode and so little of the content. I just had a little chuckle at the idea of a sitcom like that, and then we moved on. Like, you know what I mean? It was because it also served the purpose of sort of explaining why they don't have Naga and Pabu with them, because there is an element of, shouldn't Korra be riding around on her big polar bear dog? Naga has proven helpful in a fight at least a couple of times, but the idea that Naga couldn't really get on the airship for whatever reason. Bit big, bit clunky, maybe just a bit of like for safety. Let's not bring animals into a war zone. Do you know what I mean? Let's not bring our pets to this fight. As much as Naga has proven herself in a combat situation in the past, it's not worth the risk with like Zahir and the Red Lotus. So there's an element of just like the show taking the care to establish where they are. Is it a quick cutaway gag that probably doesn't really do a lot and isn't probably that funny? Yeah, I'd agree. But like, it didn't do anything too negative either for me. I was just like, I was neutral on it. Like, it got a slight smile out of me at the notion of a sitcom of those characters, and then I just moved on. Like, it didn't bother me too much. But yeah, I don't disagree with your points. It just didn't have that impact on me.
That's fair. Do you want to hear my second? That's pretty weird.
Yeah, please. I love a lot. It's our brand new. It's our
overall thoughts of the.
It's our brand new segment. Yeah. That's pretty weird.
As a whole, my summary of the episode, my overall feelings can be summarised with: I really enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot of great action. I thought there was a lot of great stuff. It's very much a part one, but it is a part one, so that's fine. I almost think this would probably be best viewed with the finale. But it's a series of great cliffhangers. I've got another one. So here I've got two. That's pretty weird, isn't it? Okay, I'll do the quick one first before I forget. Marco can surely, as you're going down the stairs, just earthbend a shitload of, at the moment what's happening is the lava's getting through some of the rock, then it's going down empty air, and then it's getting through more rock that he puts there. If he just puts a shitload of rock, it's going to take longer for the lava to get through a shitload of rock than it is a little bit of rock some air, some dead space, and then more rock. I'm like, why is he not
I
just
agree to
doing
that. Like, fill the volume of the staircase with stuff. I agree with that. I also noticed that and thought that was a bit weird. Again, not enough to create a segment on this podcast for. but I noticed that. Agree with that. So yeah, good point.
Yeah, the true second one for a bit weird, wasn't it? Okay, right. I don't know who that metal bending chief that we got an extended beat of time and her name was, right? Either they're about to become a main character, or they're going to turn out to be a member of the Red Lotus. I assume it's one of those two things, but we don't know that character, so don't do that. That's so fucking weird. Da-da! This person's gonna be important somehow. Like, oh no. So weird. That was weird, right? I think that's really justified that was a bit weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't say much on this, but I will say you have briefly met this character before. Briefly.
Well, that makes it even worse.
What's that, sorry?
That makes it even worse that they did this whole sort of, this is such and such.
Yeah, so this is Kuvira. For anyone listening who doesn't recall this episode in detail, at the end, we had a moment where we thought Korra's dad had gone off the edge of a cliff and died, and we have this shot where I'll be honest, they do their best to try and make it feel, less random than that, because she's not just there, she's there helping Korra's dad, and it's clear she's the one who rescued him. So she had a function in the actual story. But yeah, he's like, thanks for your help, Captain. And she's like, Kuvira. And it's like, it's clearly a character introduction. And then I think when they really overplay their hand is then, because I think that's fine. That's subtle. It's small. He asks for her name, she says it. It could just be a guy that's grateful for being saved. And, it tells us something about Tonrock. He wants to know the name of his savior. And the scene is more about us discovering Tonrock's fate than it is about introducing this character. The character introduction is sort of secondary to it. The moment when it becomes, I think, slightly comical is, I'm going to come with you too. No, Kuvira, you stay here with the injured. Because at that point, you've done it twice, and the second one feels a lot less earned. That's where I'm at with it. I think the first one is fine and a reasonable way to sort of in a small way say there's a person called Kuvira here. Don't worry about it. but to do it twice, minutes apart, and way more overtly the second time, because that scene has literally no function other than, hey, look at this person. This person's important enough to have considered themselves willing to come along. That's the way worse offender to me. I think if it had just been the saving Tonrock thing, I don't think you'd have had this in your brand new segment. It's a bit weird. So yeah, I agree. I do agree. It's funny, and especially because Kuvira has appeared before. So when we were back in Zaofu, she was one of the guards that I think went in search of Aiwei. There are a couple of other moments in which Kuvira has been either referenced or seen briefly in a much subtler way than was done here. But yeah, you're not wrong. Any guesses? Because you had two sort of ideas of in a way Kuvira could be relevant. Way one is she's a member of the Red Lotus. What was way two again? You had a second idea.
Just that she becomes sort of she becomes a character that we see more of.
Right. Which would imply, because there's only one episode left of this season, that would imply you think they're a sort of an important character for the next season.
Yeah, or the finale or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I get the sense they were, basically planning both of these at the same time, sort of, maybe.
Yeah.
Knew they were getting an ending, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I would like to think she remains a good guy, if I'm honest, because if the twist is she's a member of the Red Lotus, unless, again, that plot stretches over, I just think, it's just they set up a clear kind of, four people, I didn't recognise them. And I was like, is it going to be sort of are the members of the Red Lotus that we know sort of thing?
Right.
And if they've introduced someone in this just to do that in the next episode, I'll be like, oh, God.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. I'll say now. What I'll say is that they've definitely thought it through. For some reason, I don't know if anyone can hear. Can you hear the chickens, Chris, going absolutely nuts? I can.
Yeah.
So for listeners, we're recording this at like 7:30 Australia time, and the chickens that I'm looking after, I say, is part of the where I'm staying right now. They only woke up at 7, so they're having a grand old time running around the coop, making a boatload of noise, and I'm happy for them. It's a bit awkward timing, but I'll I hope listeners can forgive the potential background cricket. We had cicadas like a couple of weeks ago. Now it's chickens. So yeah, good time for all. All the animals are getting on the podcast.
Turns out the stereotypes are true. Australia, full of a lot of creatures.
You know what's funny is I had some Australian friends in London who did say it's weird how few animals there are here. And I was like, what do you mean? You're expecting like zebras just coming down the street? Like, what do you mean? And they sort of like weren't very clear. But now I've lived in Australia, I do know what they mean. Because Australia, like, I don't know if it's because so much of the area is like, cultivated as like, this, there's a lot of big national parks and a lot of areas for wildlife to live, a lot of wildlife reserves, way more than you get in England, I think. So there is just generally like a huge amount of like animal activity anywhere you go. Like, we were in a bakery the other day. There was just some birds flying around in the bakery because they'd gotten in. And because there are that many birds, wow. There are that many animals just everywhere. And no one was fussed. Like no one was even paying them attention. And I was just like, interesting. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think living alongside animals is a very I think I already told the story about the lady who warned Nadia she'd seen a snake. Like, they just live alongside it. They're used to it. They have a process. We went to a children's playground a few weeks ago with a sign that was like, warning, snakes spotted here. And there were loads of kids just playing on it. And I was like, you would not get that in the UK. If you put warning, snakes spotted here, like an official government sign at any play park, that would be the least used playground in all of the UK. It would be reserved exclusively for goth teenagers looking for a place to quietly drink.
No, it would get shut down, and I'm not even sure how it would get shut down, but it would get shut down.
It would be a way. Yeah, they'd just burn it to the ground.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite funny. The sort of coping mechanisms and the things that like. There are cobwebs everywhere here. Like, thick, huge cobwebs just along all sorts of, like, fences, on everything. And no one... Because everyone knows not to fuck with spiders, people don't just go around removing them. Like, they just leave them. And that's interesting in itself, Yeah, I don't know. It's just really interesting. I don't know. It is a bit different. But not massively so. But enough that I've noticed. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's... Yeah. Anyway, sorry for the chickens. Back to... Korra, Enter the Void.
Well, what did you think? What did you think of the episode?
I really like this episode. I like this kind of tension around the captured airbenders and the future of the Air Nation being on the line, and Korra making a choice, for the Air Nation's sake. It shows her connection to the Air Nation is strong. It shows her connection to Tenzin is strong. That after all of her debate last week, and by the way, she gives Zuko a little name check here. She's like, after my chat with Prince Zuko, I'm like, Zuko said you have two options. He did not like. Let's not assert blame here. Let's not.
You'd be mad at that. You were so. I was like, oh, that unclear Zuko chat's been referenced. That'll upset Dan.
It did. It did indeed. I just look. I didn't mind.
Zuko didn't say anything.
I didn't mind the chat. I just found it really weird that she then acted like he gave her great advice. You came to me, Chris, and you're like, I've got two options for dinner, Dan. I could have a burger or I could have pizza. And I'm like, well, burger's really good, but you do like pizza. And you were like, thanks for that really great chat, Dan. I'd be like, what? And then you went downstairs and were like, I've decided pizza. I had a chat with Dan and I want pizza. It would be weird. Because I'd said both things are good.
I really thought when you said, if you came to me for some advice and you were like,
well, I was gonna think of something more involved, but then I was like, it's only gonna complicate the point unnecessarily and make me talk for longer. So it's simplified.
Also, let's be real, Dan. We could talk for hours about whether I should have a burger or a pizza.
Well, I would honestly, in real life, I would advise you to have pizza. You prefer pizza to burgers. That is your natural state of being.
Yes, it is. It is hard to imagine. It is hard to imagine that being a discussion because I would always revert to pizza.
I know that about you. But in terms of just illustrating my point of a person with two similar-ish choices, both sort of junk food, whatever, which of the two, but that's basically what happened. When you actually read what Zuko said, he was like, well, the airbenders were obviously very important to Aang, but no one understood the importance of the Avatar to Aang either. He understood how important the Avatar was to the world. So, choice. I don't envy you, Korra. That's a tough choice. He said nothing of use, and I just find it really weird that the show has pretended like he advised Korra well. If that dialogue just existed and they moved on, I wouldn't have even clocked it. But it was immediately been followed by at least two instances of the show pretending like she got some really good advice from Zuko. And I'm like, what advice? Someone please point me to the advice. I would love to see it. Anyway, yeah. So I liked that she made the choice, and in the end, she chose the Air Nation. I think I said last week that the closest sort of thing we have to Aang, and obviously Tenzin is his own man. I'm sure I got comments about this because I didn't clarify that, but obviously Tenzin is his own man. And last week I said, he's the closest thing we have to Aang, and it's interesting to hear what he did, what he chose in that moment. He chose to protect the Avatar over the nation. And I think that's particularly interesting for Tenzin, a person grown up with the weight of that nation on his entire shoulders as the only airbender, going forward, following Aang. His almost responsibility to have a family, imagine that pressure. Then to keep the entire culture on his shoulders. I guess what I really meant last week was for someone who's in his position to choose Korra over the Air Nation says an awful lot about him and his beliefs. And where he stands morally on that, on these sort of these equivalencies, like equivalencies, like when someone is threatening like that, he's not responding to terrorist action. He's not bowing to terrorists. Is essentially what's happening, because he's protecting Korra. He's protecting the Avatar. He clearly had chose that she was more valuable. He risked the Air Nation for that, but Korra's made a different choice, and I think it's interesting. Because it says something about what Korra's affection for Tenzin and the Air Nation is, but also her value of herself. I don't think Korra sees herself as having been particularly valuable, and I think there's a self-esteem thing going on there, subtly. And I think it's really interesting that she doesn't see the Avatar as being that important because of what has she achieved. It makes sense that maybe, as Zuko said, no one understood the importance of the Avatar more than Aang. In Aang's era, Aang saved the world from a 100-year war as the Avatar, right? And that war only went on 100 years because he was gone for that amount of time. So yeah, absolutely, Zuko is correct to have said there aren't many Avatars that had the impact Aang did during their tenure. You know what I mean? There were a few. Don't get me wrong, but some of them lived through pretty peaceful times comparatively, where they were dealing with, land disputes and other such nonsense. Nothing quite the scale of 100-year war, So I just thought it was, I don't really have other than observations about all the things that have happened around it, I don't have observation beyond that. I thought it was an interesting choice to have Korra be willing to give herself up. It says it spoke to her character, but I'm not even really sure what it tells us about her, other than that self-esteem thing. But it's just interesting that that's where we're at with her. Considering how the show started with her almost being arrogant. I'm the Avatar. Deal with it. Like, I'm important. I think this is a really interesting step on her journey. She's been humbled to a degree. When you think back to the core of the first season, I'm going to deal with Amma because I'm the Avatar. From that to this, where she's like, I'm very much expendable if it means the Air Nation being saved, it's powerful stuff. And I think it, does it speak to an overarching plan for this? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's possible they had this in mind, but I think it's far more likely that they've sort of found Korra's arc as they've gone, maybe even in response to some fan feedback about her, persona in the first season. But it is, I'd say it is also possible this was always the plan. I wouldn't want to, dismiss that. Aang started off as quite, sort of childish and bratty and ignoring his responsibility and blossomed into a sort of very competent Avatar, and we saw that happen across 3 seasons. So do I put it past Mikey and Bri to have sat down and arced that out for Korra well before sitting down to write season 1? Very possible that both but I feel like it's more likely they didn't quite know where they were going with her, but I'm glad they found this because this really works for me. Basically, thought it was a really powerful moment in the episode and said a lot about her as a character. That was a big.
I'll be honest. Here's some controversy my way. I'm gonna say it. I think Korra's arc is so far clearer and more satisfying. Aang did become that, but quite slowly, and he would sometimes seem to grow and seem to have learnt a lesson, and then 2 episodes later he'd revert back to being quite childish because he was a child. Like, Korra's older and it's easier, I think, to some degree to do that with her character and her story. But I'm going to be honest, I prefer the character arc of Korra at this stage. And it is comparable because it's 3 seasons of both shows. And I just feel like they got there a bit quicker with Korra. And Aang is Aang, and Aang is a legend, and it's hard to. I don't prefer Korra as a character. I preferred Aang, sort of the OG. I think Aang is the better character. As a character, I think Aang is better. But if you were to say to me, spend time with one of them, I'd spend time with Korra over Aang. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't mean I prefer Korra. But I like Korra more. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just in that general sense of, I found Aang a little frustrating to watch sometimes because of the slight toing and froing, and because of there'd be times where it'd be like, oh, dude, you I think it's the child thing, and like I say, it's advantage Korra because she's an older character. But I do find Korra less difficult than I did Aang. I did struggle with Aang occasionally.
It's interesting because Nadia has been jokingly making her own notes when we watch episodes together. These last couple episodes, and at the end she's like, "Would you like to hear my notes?" Because I make notes as we go, and one of her notes was just like Korra is like the worst character in her own show. Like, she hates Korra. She can't stand.
Oh yeah,
Korra.
But that can be true and still, like, do you know what I mean? I'm not denying that. Like, I'm talking purely Avatar on Avatar. I do prefer pretty much all the other characters to Korra in her own show, and I do think she's probably the least interesting. But that's because we're used to seeing Aang grew as a character and grew as an Avatar. Korra is a more complete. Take the season number out and view length of the show. Korra is a more complete Avatar, and she's a more complete character than Aang was at this stage, and that is weird for people that are huge fans of Avatar. And I've got that doesn't bother me necessarily, but equally, as we've kind of discussed before, There'll be people who the team Avatar thing doesn't bother, but that bothers me a lot. So Korra not learning to become the Avatar, and this is kind of we've reached a broader subject. Although I think that's fine. Like I say, a lot of this episode it's a great setup episode. So yeah, I think for people that want their Avatar show to be about an Avatar learning to be an Avatar, I can see why they would find Korra uninteresting and would struggle with the Korra character. That doesn't bother me as much, but I accept it and understand it because I have a clear equivalent in the Team Avatar stuff.
Mm. Yeah, I do somewhat agree with Aang because he often he'd have moments where he'd sort of accept his responsibility and do the right thing, and then the very next week he'd be like back to being like, let's go ride the elephant koi, which is the example I always give because it's just like the cleanest example of him just shirking his responsibility to go do something fun. I think that, to simplify where I started this, I think because I think you definitely veered into a wider point there, which I do mostly agree with. I do think I understand why people prefer Aang, and I think Aang is the more engaging character overall. I think there's something really satisfying about watching. We talked about this as well. This idea of it's very commonly used, the weight of the world on a child. It's almost hard to watch sometimes because you understand. They did it with Steven Universe, they did it with Harry Potter, they did it with it's a very common trope, and with Avatar, a 12-year-old should not have the responsibility of the world thrown on them. And when you explore the idea of what that can do to a child, it's brutal. Aang was forced to grow up too quick, as was Steven Universe, And I think what's really interesting about the way they did it here was they would have those moments with Aang of reversion, where there'd be a week where he needed to respond to a thing that was physically happening in front of him. And you'd think, well, now this has got to be the moment he learns what he's doing is really important and that he needs to be focused. And then he was back to trying to do something fun. And then I think when you step back and see it as a whole, I think it's a really interesting choice because I go, well, actually, no, that makes perfect sense because he was clinging to what moments of childhood fun he could have. That was his arc as a character because he started as someone who did not want to be the Avatar. Remember, that was what I think was particularly interesting about Aang versus Korra. Korra wanted to be the Avatar. He ran away when he found out he was going to be the Avatar. Korra was like, I'm the Avatar, deal with it. And I think immediately we set these two characters very, very seriously apart from each other. And I think what's happened with Korra is she's gone from being sort of almost arrogant about her place in the world, frustrated that no one would trust her to go do stuff, to being like, no, I understand I'm not the most important thing, but I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to fight for that. She's fighting for her beliefs now rather than to get out of Aang's shadow. And I think that's a big change for her. And I've enjoyed watching that shift. And I think it does, whether intended from the start or not, it does justify the approach to her character in the first two seasons. We talked a lot about whether that would be a satisfying journey or not. And we're only 3 of the 4 seasons in, and I'm very happy with where we've landed. This season particularly has done an awful lot to round out Korra and her journey and her maturity. And we've pointed out multiple moments. If you want to go back and listen through this season of this podcast, it feels like almost every week, or at least every other week, I've stopped and said, oh, another great moment of maturity from Korra this week. We've learned we've seen another example of her choosing the mature path, the right path, and I think somebody could argue that it's change that's come from not a direct source. I think we all tend to feel like in television if someone changes, it needs to be because of some sort of specific event. But I just want to point to season 1 and 2 and just go, all of it. All of that. Because when you actually look back through what Korra's been through in those seasons, it's a lot. It's an awful lot. From her and Tenzin crying in that, at the foot of the Yang Statue Island, her like crying in Tenzin's arms, through to like, last season fighting her own uncle to save the world. Like she's been through an awful lot. Or losing her connection to the past avatars, which would have been traumatic for her. There was a point when she had amnesia last year. Like she's had that's a lot of experiences for someone to have been through. It's changed her, and I don't think it needs to be justified more than that. To be honest, she's grown by just time and age. She's matured by just time and aging, but she has not had a smooth journey. Like there's plenty of reason for her to have learned and grown across those 2 seasons prior to this one. And it was a little bit of, if memory serves, there's a little bit of a time jump between the end of last season and the start of this one. No, it's pretty intermediate because we were in the immediate aftermath of the spirit vines and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I've really enjoyed seeing where Korra's grown to this year, and I think if anyone wants to make this circular to pretty much one of our first episodes of this, covering Korra. Oh, that's what we should have called it. Damn, we missed that one, didn't we? And welcome to Covering Korra. Oh, it's perfect. Anyway, when we covered season 1 and we talked a lot about Korra's personality and how irritating that could have been perceived and how fans didn't necessarily react well to that. This season is the antithesis to that. They did a really great job. Is she the most interesting character on this show? No. Watching somebody just become mature and competent at their job and do the right thing isn't inherently on its own particularly exciting. She is maybe arguably complete a little early because we do have a season left. And that doesn't help her be... So she's gone from being the most annoying character in her own show to being probably one of the more well-rounded, level-headed ones, and you're sort of going, because there wasn't as much struggle between those 2 states. There was struggle, but not struggle between those 2 states. She's still not the most interesting character in her own show, because the first position on that growth chart and the last position on that growth chart are the least interesting. And I guess maybe the problem is, and the criticism might be, that there isn't necessarily a midpoint. There's no point when she's struggling between the 2. She sort of goes from one to the other across the 2 seasons in sort of almost a subtle, imperceivable way. And because there isn't really like a mid state like you would get like in a second act of a film, where a character is sort of somewhere near learning the lesson they need to learn but hasn't quite figured it out yet, but you're seeing hints of it. Maybe that makes it less satisfying. I don't know, less conflict for people. But yeah, obviously, I've talked for a very long time about this now, so I'm going to shut up in a second. But yeah, it's. I think that sort of is for me like, I don't think that's going to change going forward either. I think that's kind of going to be my final position on like Korra as a character. I don't think season 4 is going to change my mind on that element.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think we've talked quite a lot about kind of a wider non-episode thing. So let's say this, Dan. I don't know how much more there is to say on this than this, but fake airbender clothes and fake airbenders made out of water. Great. Love the idea. Love the use of bending in that way. Sets her up as being so powerful and creepy. I love Tenzin's little beaten, weak shake of the head. Like I love the fact that he's beaten, but just the fact that he's going, no, like this isn't what you think it is, and you're like, but how can it not be? He's there, the airbenders are there, then the reveal and the trick of it all. I loved it. I thought that was great.
Yeah, it's haunting, isn't it? It's upsetting. It's creepy. Yeah. When the moment that they all sort of away, it's so the episode kind of throws it away a little bit. Like they do it very quickly. That reveal. Oh, I would have taken an age. I'd have had close-up shots of the clothes sort of hitting the floor. I'd have, you know what I mean? Like I would have really milked it. But they were very restrained, and it was just as effective. I think it was super creepy. Yeah, I love that moment. It's a great idea. Like I think Poli's death is sort of like the thing that always sticks out in my memory from this episode. But watching it back this time with a notepad essentially in front of me, like my phone, but like I was, my notes in front of me, it did really strike me how good that is. and how I feel like in my memory it's always been overshadowed by the death that happens in this episode. But it's such a great moment. 100% agree with you. Yeah, it's animated beautifully. It's written really well. It makes perfect sense that Zahir wouldn't have given away his leverage like that. Fantastic. Just thumbs up. Big thumbs up.
I thought it was brilliant. What else did you enjoy?
Well, I just want to see. I got a question for you, Chris. Water arms, very in vogue this year. So hot right now. Why is everyone suddenly using water arms? All the waterbenders in this. So there's 3 waterbenders in this episode. Is that right? So we got Ming-Hua, we got Tonrok. Maybe it's just 2. But Tonrok... Oh, no, I tell you what it is. It's because a couple of episodes ago, Kaya, when she fought with Zahir, she used water arms, and we thought that was kind of funny because obviously Ming-Hua's kind of made water arms her thing because she doesn't, she doesn't have arms, so she's replacing them with the water. But then Tonrok used water arms this week. I was just like... They're just in vogue. Are they just a popular thing right now? Were they on Waterbending Monthly? Water arms and what you can do with them. Like, why is everyone just suddenly latched to that ability? I don't know. I feel like it's taken away the specialty of Ming-Hua, to be honest with you, a little bit.
Well, Dan, get ready for some A-grade fansplaining. You ready for this?
Please do.
It's not in the show, but I deposit it as an explanation or theory.
Do it. I'm here.
We're dealing with military like soldiers and aficionados. We're dealing with, high-ranking officials in this world that are trained and highly skilled.
Yes.
They know who these villains are. They know what they're up against. The notion of them going, okay, well, we need to train ourselves up and fight how she's gonna fight. We need to combat this by having the same skills. We've been caught by surprise. We've had defeats earlier in the season. So let's do a bit of training. Let's work out how they do it, and let's fight water arms with the water arms. Does make sense. It's not in the show. I'm fansplaining, but I like it.
Yeah, I think that's true unless you remember that he doesn't fight Ming-Hua with the water arms. He fights Zahir with the water arms.
Yeah, but they got, they're all...
It's not water arm on water arm. He's just gone, oh yeah, I like that, and he's done it himself.
Yeah, because he's like, you know what? She makes a lot of sense. This was wise. I like it. I'm in.
Yeah. I'm just gonna go back to the meme from Zoolander. So hot right now.
Yeah, well, that works too.
Yeah,
that's still an explanation as well.
Yeah. I don't know. It just seems. Okay. From an instant world perspective, maybe water arms have become a very commonly used tactic in the world of Korra. We haven't seen a huge amount of water bending in this show up until this season, which is funny because we had a season where there was huge chunks of. Well, I guess we saw Esker and Desna, and they did some waterbending, and so did Tonrong. I guess there was some waterbending, quite a lot of waterbending last year, actually. It just feels that's actually made it weirder because no one used. I don't believe anyone used water arms last year, and yet here we are, water arms all over the place. It just feels like she got out of prison. Everyone saw it and went, I'm gonna steal that. Good idea, lady.
Yeah, that was.
I don't know.
That also feels very real world, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Yeah, I found it a bit strange and a bit funny. We'll get to the big thing in a minute, because the big thing is obviously Zahir has unlocked a new bending ability, which we'll come back to. But I will quickly get through a couple of small notes first, if that's okay, just to clear through them. I really appreciate this episode for finally teaching me how to pronounce Poli's name. Maybe a little late to teach me how to pronounce her name, the episode you murder her, but sure. I liked that they gave her and Zahir a moment together, so that when she is removed from the equation later on, you understand that hurts him more. It sort of reminds you.
Yeah, it does kind of make you go, oh, she's dying, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
It feels, yeah.
Yeah, they have a moment early in the episode because he's like, and it's funny because he really gives the game away. I thought it was really overt when I watched it this time, but I don't remember predicting it the first time I saw it. But he sat there, he sat there and he goes, empty and become wind. And I'm like, oh, yeah, he's learning how to fly.
Yeah.
That's where that's going. I thought there was a weird emphasis on her hug with Mako when Korra was leaving to give herself up. I didn't care for it. It was like, she quickly hugs Asami and says something to her. Then there's like a weird, like, the music sort of like rises. There's the camera changes for it when she hugs Mako. I don't know why they did it that way. And then there's the Bolin joke where like Bolin sort of hugs her from like the side. She didn't expect it. I don't know. It seems strange to me. I
actually didn't mind it as much because I think you could interpret it two ways. I think you can interpret that moment as feelings rearing again, or you can interpret that moment as things have been a bit weird, but I might be about to die. So, can we just hug and be cool? Yeah, let's hug and be cool.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind it as much because I think you can read that second explanation explanation from it.
Yeah, I like that. I think I'm gonna borrow that for my headcanon because I think I prefer that to the other thing.
Take it. It's a gift from me to you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I like it better with that as the explanation for sure. I am glad she got the biggest moment of goodbye with her dad, though. I thought that was nice because again, a bit like Zahir with Pali, I think we set up her dad's importance to her before we, make it look like he died. So yeah.
Yeah, but also it just makes sense. Like she's not got a particularly, Asami's probably the closest thing she's got to her best friend, and even their relationship doesn't feel at this point particularly explored. Whether I really hope they go on to explore them more, just because I really like them as a combination, but. For where we are at this point, I think that her getting the goodbye with her dad makes most sense. Like I say,
agreed.
they're not a team. So it makes sense that sort of dramatic final goodbye moment would be with her dad. He's after Tenzin, who's not there, probably the closest character to her of the people that are there.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed, 100%. But it's good that the show kind of like made sure they did that, and that was the moment she had. Because I feel like, I feel like there's a world where they don't, where he's kind of there and they almost forget he exists. My dad, because they kind of did that last year. Anyway, we're not doing a Dan Kicks season 2 today. Not yet, anyway. Maybe something else will come up later where I'll feel more of a need to do it. I was sad to see the Northern Air Temple basically destroyed, but it did lead us to one of our cooler ideas this episode, which we haven't talked about yet. So on the other side of the plot, we have Bolin escaping from the lava, and while we have talked about just do more rocks down that corridor, do the one you did, we do have the reveal of Bolin can lava bend, and him replying, "I know, I just found out." Which is a great moment. But how are we feeling about Bolin lava bending?
I think it's good. I think it makes sense because lava's got some elements of rock in it, isn't it? Surely, lava's not just all fire, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Which is why the other guy can do it, because the other guy that's lava bending is also an earthbender.
Yeah. So it's that makes sense. And I thought it was actually quite a good twist. We've had it lead up to is he or is he not going to metal bend? For him to do something else completely different but really cool and really useful, I thought was a really good twist. So I really like that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's a good subversion of expectations because they do make you really feel like he's going to, by the end of the season, in a moment of need, find metal bending, and the idea that in a moment of need he finds lava bending. It's good as well because it means we don't have a situation where it's like, oh, the lava's coming towards us. Oh, the only thing that can stop it is this metal door that we just can't move. And Bolin, finding a moment to pull it across. Like, it just would not have been satisfying, I don't think.
I'll be honest, when he started sort of gearing up to do something cool and went back towards all the lava, it literally in my head went, there's no metal near there, is there?
It's good. Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah,
so it absolutely worked on me.
Yeah, but it's sort of it does catch up because there wasn't like an obvious like door for him to use to save it. I remember when I first watched it being pleasantly surprised by that choice, and also this idea as well. And look, the show doesn't. This is subtext, not text, but like it's okay if there's a skill you don't have. There might be something else you can do that's really cool. Like, it's a nice message, just in general, right? Okay, maybe you can't metal bend. You can lava bend. That's okay. You know, maybe you can't dance, but hey, maybe you can sing. You know, like, it's just, I think, for a kid's show, and I know sometimes it's easy to forget that it's a kid's show. I guess it's more of a YA show at this point. But, like, for a show aimed at a youngish audience, I think that's lovely. I'm all for it.
I agree.
Two other big moments in the episode we haven't talked about yet, actually, that we probably do need to cover. Asami is the one who saves Tenzin. She's the one who unlocks him. And I wrote in my notes, "Yay for Asami doing something," and then I put in quotes, Ralph Wiggum, "I'm helping."
Hashtag for Asami.
Hashtag justice for Asami. No, that was something. If we'll call it, I think we're to rename this segment like Asami Watch. Like every week, we're going to just see if she did anything useful, if the writers allowed her to do anything of interest. This week, she got to help.
Yeah, that's very true, and it was good.
Yeah, it's good. Great use, perfect use of Asami. Use her technical know-how to unpick some. Bolin couldn't have picked those handcuffs. He probably could have smashed them with a rock or whatever, but he couldn't have picked them.
Yeah.
Very important.
It's very true.
Very important. Lin and Su-yin, that's a really powerful. So this moment is one of those moments that is another one that is lost as a result of the Puli death, which is so it's so iconic for me in this episode that I almost forget that it is part of reconciliation under the threat of death for the sisters. Lin and Su-yi are the ones fighting. Su-yin, are fighting Puli, and they are pinned down. And Lin basically realizes that she's not going to be able for them to both necessarily get out of there. One of them needs to go head to head to distract police so the other one can escape. And Lin says to Su-yin that she loves her and then goes after Puli. And it's only when Puli sort of bests Lin and knocks her down, nearly killing her. She doesn't quite go off the edge of the cliff, but she nearly does. That's when Su-yin steps in with the metal plates around the head and blows up Puli, which is, again, a really brutal death, but like to have that also attached to this really beautiful moment of like Lin and Su-yin sort of making up. I think someone could argue it's not particularly earned because it's just done cheaply in a life or death situation. But I think we got them there across a few episodes. I don't think it's necessarily just pulled out of its arse here. Not completely anyway. But how did you feel about all that stuff, Chris? Because that is quite a big moment from the episode.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought that moment between the two of them was really nice. I think it was a nice payoff of all the moments we've had surrounding their plot. And like you say, it's this nice juxtaposition with what I now realise is quite a gruesome death.
Yeah. I really liked it too. I'll be interested if anyone in the comments below feels that it kind of they pulled a reconciliation out of nowhere with this. I'd like to hear more on that. Because I feel like someone could feel that way, but it's not how I felt. So I'm not equipped to sort of phrase that argument to even counter it. So if somebody is in the comments below feels that way and wants to, express themselves, maybe we'll talk about it next season. We'll come back to it.
Yeah, but I always feel like I think in heightened moments like that, does make sense. Like, do you know what I mean? They actually do love each other, and they think there's a chance one of them might die, like, at any moment. It makes sense that they'd make up at that moment.
Right, yeah. I agree. I felt that way. I just kind of, like, I kind of foresaw a potential issue in that they didn't, that someone could argue it wasn't, that's a bit of a cheap way to earn that moment, and that it should have better been earned.
Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
You know, the sisters actually, like, having a conversation at some point, and you know what I mean, like rather than I mean, because we sort of criticised last year Bolin confessing his love in similar circumstances of life and death. So I don't know, you know, there's somewhere in the back of my brain going, I think there's a criticism in this. I didn't feel it, but I think it's there. My logic brain feels it, I guess, rather than my actual how I felt watching the episode. Somewhere in the logic of it something doesn't quite work, but I can't articulate it because it didn't bother me very much. Does that make sense? So yeah.
It does make sense.
If anyone wants to pull that apart for me, I would appreciate it. God, a lot happened in this episode because we've also forgotten to discuss Mako finally sort of a little bit accepting Kai, which is another lovely moment. Do you want to talk about that, or you got any thoughts on that, Chris? Because I talked a lot just now.
If anything, that's a little like. I tell you what, I'm intrigued as to where that goes because I don't know if they've done enough to redeem Kai to the audience. So I can see why Marco in that moment is like, thanks for coming back for us. Although he had very little choice, Kai. It is also the thing that makes sense.
Do you think he had very little choice?
I don't want just Kai.
Could Kai not have just
because
could Kai not have just flown off on the thing and lived his life?
I suppose, yeah, and he is a bit of a runaway, so yeah, that does make sense. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I think it's earned, and yeah, I liked it. I did enjoy that moment. I don't think I've ever won you over so quickly with so few words. No, but it's true. But you are right. He absolutely could have. And the thing that did it for me was in my head. I went, "Oh yeah, he's a tearaway. He's a runaway. He's a runaway. He does this. He escapes. He fucks off." And oh shit! Sorry. Oh.
Yeah.
Darn. I swore twice. Sorry. Excuse me. We were doing so well. He runs away.
So I'll be honest with you, Chris. We probably weren't. Every time we think we've had a clean episode, we found so much swearing. So. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So I think when I realised, when you said that, it made me go, oh yeah, no, it's well within his character to like literally run away. He doesn't do that here. It is earned, and yeah, fair play.
Yeah, because I quite liked that moment. I thought yeah, that's how I felt about it. In that, like, his options, one of them was just go off and live his life, and I feel like the Kai we first met would have absolutely just done that, been like, good luck, guys, bye, and a sack of Air Nation trinkets over his shoulder, in a little bindle. But I thought it was really good, and I think Marco's thumbs up is a big shift as well, because other characters have been on his side for a while, and having us see Marco appreciate him was powerful. God, so much happened in this episode, man. When you think about it, like they introduced everyone's favorite new character, Kuvira. We had the Kai moment. We had the Lin moment. We had the police death. We had the fake airbenders melting away. This episode has God damn it. This episode is packed with so much stuff, and we have yet to talk about arguably the biggest thing this episode does, which is introduce an advanced form of airbending, or reintroduce, I guess, because it's rediscovered. Zahir can fly now. Let me do it. They fly now. There we go. We did it.
Well, yeah, just quickly before because I don't want you to go, we didn't talk about that. Just quickly before we discuss flying, because let's end on flying. No, I haven't got any theories as to what's going on at the end. Like Korra surrounded by what appears to be kryptonite. Like I haven't got any theories on that. I don't. I like watching this without theorizing. I assume they've got a plan. I assume there's going to be some sort of Red Lotus reveal because it was set up like that. But I haven't got any real kind of thoughts as to where that's going. I'm just excited to see how they play it out. In terms of flying, I think it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Like, if you can control air, the first thing you do is try and make enough air, come around you and, come below you to fly. Like, I think it makes complete sense. I'm surprised it's taken this long. I'm here for it. I think it's great. I think it's a great payoff to what was he doing stealing that thing and why. I think we probably still need to... Oh, there was another thing in this episode. It was so subtle as well. When he was talking to... I can't say her name, but his girlfriend.
Yeah,
and he's like... and she says, you've always been there for me ever since I was, captured by that warlord as a kid. I'm like, oh, there's some, more justification for his views and backstory just slid in there in a line. Like, and I wasn't particularly even mad at it. Like, I thought it was quite clever. Maybe it was a bit, expositional. But, so this notion of this, I still want to explore. I think they've done enough to justify his villainous attitudes. I kind of want to see his history with airbending and why he's got such an affinity with it explored a little bit, but the notion that he knew the legends, knew the myths, and went after it to discover the the chain thing, and then figured out how to do it, makes complete sense. Is a great payoff, and I think flying makes more sense than I'd have thought of flying way before I thought of lava and blood bending. Yeah. So yeah, I'm here for it, man.
100% agree. 100% agree. Hard agree. It's a really obvious thing. I think the reason we didn't get to it sooner is unfortunately just because of the premise. The Last Airbender, it was just Aang and he was a child and he had other shit to worry about, to be honest. And then we got to this series and, we only have a very limited number of airbenders, to be working with. So it makes sense that it would have cropped up here as the Air Nation starts to rebuild and people start to figure out stuff. And it's a shame the villain got there first, but it is exactly as you said. It is the most logical extension of a bending ability. It was almost inevitable, I feel, that we'd get here eventually. And I like the idea that it was based in some sort of old airbending legends, this Guru Lahima, this whole idea of let go your earthly tether, empty and become wind, enter the void. One thing I really find interesting, and this was, I'm stealing this from the trivia, so I don't want anyone to think this is my own point, but this is, as clever as it is, right, this is even better. As clever as it is on the surface, I should say, knowing this makes it even better, I should say. When Zahir says, I found true freedom, I am no longer bound to this earth by worldly desires, I have entered the void. He is making reference to the seventh chakra. The last thing that the guru wanted Aang to drop was his being bound to earth by worldly desires. But Aang couldn't let his friends go. He couldn't let Katara go. So he couldn't unblock his seventh chakra. Zahir just lost his only remaining earthly attachment in Pali. He lost her and had nothing left to block him. How easy is it for the man who has basically nothing to let go of everything? He
Yeah,
unlocked
that
his.
makes a whole lot of sense.
It's so good. Like, and whether this is intended, but it must be, because he literally, the quote from the episode, I found true freedom. I am no longer bound to this earth by worldly desires. It's so clear. Brian Konietzko and Michael DiMartino are geniuses. This is next level storytelling for me. The idea that if Aang had been able to let go of, Katara and Sokka, he too might have found this ability. And a little bit like lightning bending, last week we talked about how for the first people to do it, it was a very difficult thing for them to learn how to do, and they did so by having to be very calm and cold in the heart. And here, flying has required him to be detached from all his worldly, attachments. Maybe in the future, more people will figure out how to do it beyond that. But right now, that's how the first person has achieved it. And I just think that is so clever. It ties back to Aang, and that inherently keeps it linked to airbending. It's just it's a big circle, and it's glorious. And I love it so much. It's so good. And also, just a really scary thing to see a villain do, if I'm being honest. Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it was great. And like you say, just pretty terrifying, because it's just so cool. And as is tradition with this show, I look forward to everyone doing it in 2 episodes time. That's with the old water hands. No, it's brilliant. I think it makes so much sense. It's such an exciting twist. Even though actually, the practicalities of it are not, people have got ways to travel, and the most airbenders have those orange wing thingies, but it still, despite that, feels so cool.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I like this well that they reinforce his loss when he goes after he's flown away and he's kidnapped Korra, which is how this episode ends. He goes back and is the other members of the Red Lotus are like, where's Pali? And he's like, she died today, but she died for the cause, and then he goes to see Korra, and she's like, at this point, Korra thinks he killed her dad. That's a really great moment as well, actually. Korra's just breathing fire at him. Oh, I love that. There's so much in this episode. This episode is jam-packed. But yeah, Korra breathes fire this week, guys, just in case you missed it. We nearly did. Because she thinks he killed her dad. She breathes fire at him, and he's just like, I lost someone today too. And they really are leaning in to Zahir's loss also. And I just think that's really clever. Very powerful for his character. And then he talks about using poison. Chris has refused to speculate, but that's okay. Chris drew a line in the sand. He's like, Dan, I know you shtick at this point. I figured you out. You're going to ask me what I think's happening next. I'm not bothering. Don't worry. I'm enjoying it more not doing that, mate. Stop it. So,
well, presumably they're gonna try and, I don't know, aren't they trying to bring the spirit world into the, just get rid of barriers completely and get rid of all monarchies?
So they want to rid of all power structures, which is why that Tonrock was a particularly vulnerable character, because Tonrock is obviously the leader of the Water Tribe. So it was he as chief of Water Tribe, it's he was very much, I imagine, in Zahir's crosshairs anyway, regardless of his relation to the
and that's which is presumably why they say to him, "Say hi to the Earth Queen." Precisely. Yes. Correct. Momentarily are in a 90s action movie. I don't know. The poison, enough poison, and they can control her and get her to use her powers to get what they want. Something like that. I don't know.
Well, good theory. Solid.
I'm just enjoying the ride, Dan.
No, I'm with you. And as much as I joke, that's very valid. Don't worry, I'm not criticising. Very quickly, because I just remembered something Nadia had in her notes. There's obviously a moment this week when Oogie, the big bison, shows up just in time to help them all get to where Korra is to help her, towards the end of the episode. And Tenzin gives him a big hug and is like, "Oh, I missed you, buddy," or something. Gives him a bit of a hug. And I just remember thinking, I remember thinking, it was really nice to see that Tenzin has such a good relationship with his bison, because obviously that just speaks to Aang and his relationship with Appa. And Nadia sort of found it chucklesome, because she was kind of just imagining a young Tenzin still a stick in the mud with his stick in the mud bison. She found the idea of young Tenzin very amusing, basically.
I'll be honest with you, Dan. I have 100% lost track of whose air bison is whose in this show.
Well, I mean, Tenzin has had Oogie since season 1. That's been the air bison that they've had. Then this season they introduced, obviously, wild ones that they've been slowly training. But the small one that's attached itself to Kai is the only other one of note. And I don't think that has a name yet. Or if it does, I've not picked it up. So there's only really 2 of note. Every one of the rest of them is just part of the herd. So there's Oogie, which is the one that that Tenzin has had since Series 1, and he's flown his family around on, and has been a tamed air bison for them. And then obviously there's the new young one that Kai has been riding this episode. So that's the only, those are the only 2 of note.
You remember that scene in Good Burger where Ed reads the contract and he's like, and then he just goes, I know some of these words.
Yeah.
That's, I use that a lot in life, and I use it here. I know some of those words, but
It's not got in. That's fair. That's fair. Anyway, is it time, Chris?
Yeah.
Are you going to do this?
Let's triv it up!
I'm going to give you some trivia. So, they very deliberately decided to, contrast the colour palette of Book 2's finale with this and its subsequent episode. The colour palette of the Northern Air Temple was intentionally greyer to complement sort of a more foreboding mood to this finale. I like it. It does stand out in contrast to the previous season, which was ultra colourful. I liked the look of the previous season, but I don't think I'd want that for every season. So yeah, do something different. Very good. I was very sad at the Northern Air Temple being melted away, by the way, in the lava. That made me very sad. Because I just thought of how
that happened as well.
So much happened in this episode.
That was a very haunting image, I agree.
Yeah, so much happened in this episode. It's upsetting, because I just kept thinking back to Aang being devastated that the machinist had put, technology in there and knocked over some of the old statues and stuff. And then I saw the image of it sort of burning in the background and was just like, oh God. Even when they first arrive, actually, and they're flying over it, and you can see holes in all the buildings from when previous week was using her explosions to keep the airbenders in check, so to speak. Brutal. It's just horrible to see. It makes me very sad. But, maybe the Air Nation can sort of rebuild. Maybe that's
it's
a good
open.
thing.
They usually do in these type of shows, don't they?
Yeah. The good guys generally tend to win. That's fair. The action sequence...
No, I mean specifically, there'll be destruction, and then in the next episode or whatever, just most of it will be rebuilt. Steven Universe the movie, great destruction. They're rebuilding it. Don't worry, it's all good.
Yeah, we'll be all back together next week. Don't worry about it. The action sequence where Korra fights Zahir while shackled, it deliberately emulate the choreography of the action films of Jackie Chan and Jet Li. I nearly called him Jackie Lee, because both names were in front of me, and I because when I'm reading these, sometimes I'm sort of skimming over it so I can say it. I don't think I read as fast as I speak, so sometimes I sort of skim over the words and fill it in with my brain, and that really nearly led to a really strange merger of Jackie Chan and Jet Li, a fusion of the two of them, which would be an interesting person to meet, but I don't know if that would have made sense. But yeah, so I've seen many a Jackie Chan movie where he's fought with either handcuffed or with his arms stuck in his jacket or whatever as he tries to battle back. Action comedy was Jackie Chan's thing. I don't think I don't think I've ever seen Jet Li necessarily do that, but it doesn't mean he hasn't. But yeah, the sequences were built around these ideas of the limitations hindering the character's ability to fight. So Jackie Chan movies where he gets his hand stuck in like a pot and he still has to fight while he's not got his fist or whatever, and then it breaks off at some point. Things like that. So yeah, it's really fun, and I like that, and I love that shot of her leaping over her handcuffs and then bursting out the air and flying away. It's great from her feet and sort of hyperextending. Yeah, awesome, really cool visual. So this is an interesting one. So Zahir meditating in a subterranean cave while levitating in midair was actually a callback to a piece of concept art Brian Konietzko had drawn of Aang in the initial planning for Last Airbender, similarly meditating while floating in an ice cave. So this was the early development for Avatar The Last Airbender. So you're right, it is one of the first things someone might think of when thinking of airbending, is the idea to fly, and clearly it was one of the first things they considered also. Lynn calls Puli a third-eyed freak, which is exactly pretty much what Katara called Combustion Man in The Runaway. Also, both of those characters die at the hands of their own explosions. And, obviously both because of a thing an external character has done. Suyin covers this character's head in Puli's head in metal, and then she explodes. But I think is it Sokka throws a rock, or no, Toph maybe throws a rock and hits him right in the sort of eye thing in the middle, and then he explodes. So yeah, both characters die in pretty gruesome ways as it goes.
Who does? I don't want to give you something so I can look. I'll look it up. What's the character's name?
Which character? Pili? Oh, Pili.
I'll just call it Combustion Man. I'm going to look at, because I want to know who throws the rock, because I just can't remember. So let me look that up while you carry on.
Yeah. So the last piece of Triv, which I have lost. This is a good one. The network apparently objected to the way Korra was chained up because they thought her limbs formed an X shape while she was suspended in midair, which resembles a diagonal cross. And I guess they were just worried about offending the religious folk. Apparently, this is something they were concerned about until Brian Konietzko brought up how SpongeBob SquarePants had their title character chained up in an identical way in one of the scenes. Probably lighter context. But yeah, if they got away with it there in SpongeBob, Korra can get away with it for sure. So yeah. Did we get the answer to who?
Yeah, I don't know if I said this out loud or if it was one of your options, but I was pretty sure it was Sokka, and it was Sokka.
Yeah. So Sokka was one of my options. It was Toph or Sokka. Right?
Yeah,
it was either Sokka with his boomerang or Toph with a rock. I think were my thinkings.
Yeah, so it was Sokka with his boomerang.
Gotcha. I think the reason Toph with a rock is in my head is because earlier in this season of Korra, Bolin hits her right in the head with a rock, I think.
Yes, yeah, I believe he does.
Mm-hmm. Cool. There you go. Sokka being useful with his boomerang, with his trusty boomerang. Let's see. That is all the trivia. So it's time, Chris. And I'm sure, you've had several weeks now. This must be the pre-prepared, pre-written, give me that feedback song. So yeah. I'm just gonna hand over to you for what will be, I'm sure, a glorious few seconds of audio.
Yeah. Give me the feedback, give it to me. The obvious thing to do is to continue this bit and do a really good song for the finale. But if I'm honest, I'm worried I'll still forget. Let's find out what happens next week. Give me your feedback.
Welcome to Give Me That. Go on.
Just genuinely, the obvious thing to do would be to next week knock it out of the park, and I'm just not sure I'll remember.
That's some tension and some good old dramatic storytelling for our listeners. Will he or won't he remember? Tune in next week, kids. Same bat time, same bat channel. But anyway, in the meantime, feedback from last series. or aka give me that feedback. This is where we read a feedback that we got from a listener on a previous episode, and I want to put an end to this. Right, I've mentioned it before, but I am so tired of every couple of months or every couple of weeks seeing this same comment, and I'm going to deal with it for the third and final time, and I don't want to hear it from any of you. Right? Back in the drill episode of Avatar The Last Airbender, I talked about how it didn't make sense they were able to use that water to cut through the metal. And I am so tired of people talking about water drills and water cutters, right? And I'm going to read this card. And it's not specifically against this listener. It's all of you. You're all in the doghouse as far as I'm concerned, because I'm so tired. I literally get tweets about this all the time, as well as YouTube comments. It needs to stop, right? Black Gemstone 801 is who I'm picking on this week, whose comment says, "I'm sure you've been corrected already." Yeah. People have. You're wrong, but we'll come to that. But yes, I have been corrected already. But water drills and cutters are a thing. Lol. Steel is no match. That's why fire hoses in American civil rights protests were so insane back in the 60s. But honestly, I'm just commenting for the engagement. So, first of all, thank you for commenting for engaging. We love you for that. We appreciate you for that. We're still getting great comments we're still getting amazing comments about people's breakfasts. In fact, Punkfish, resident food eater and commenter about food, says, I seem to be listening to you a lot in the mornings, but I had porridge for breakfast with diced apples and some cinnamon.
Oh, what a breakfast. I don't like porridge, but that's a breakfast, man. That's some effort.
That's an excellent breakfast, and I think I'm going to steal the cinnamon on apples thing. I don't think I do that, and I should do that. That sounds great. I love the idea of cinnamon on apples. Anyway, but back to Black Gemstone. I'm very appreciative of you taking the time to comment, but you have no idea how much I hear this, and you also have no idea how wrong this is. Okay. I know, and I'm very familiar with the fact that water at the correct speed can pretty much cut through anything. If there's enough pressure, enough speed, water is extremely strong. When we go back to the episode in question, with Aang and Katara passing that one little bit of water back and forth at like an incredibly slow speed, no, that would not cut through steel. It would not. The reason those water pressure things is they use huge amounts of water moving at extremely fast speeds. That's how that happens. That is not what happened in Avatar The Last Airbender. That water is moving extremely slowly, as depicted. I stand by my criticism. It does not work. So sick of it.
Give me your feedback, Freemas.
Tired of it, Chris. I'm putting it to bed. And again, to that listener, Black Gemstone 801, we love you. We do love you. But stop. Everyone needs to.
You sure got your engagement, didn't you?
Yeah. Everyone needs to stop, please. It's silly. It's silly, and it ignores the actual issue. It's so frustrating. Like, I could go to Twitter right now. Let me see how recently I got one of these. It will have been weeks ago. It won't have been months ago. It will have literally been weeks ago. They come up so often. Let's see. Oh, I'd have to go to the Nothing But Static one, which I don't have immediate access to on here. No, I don't. That's unfortunate. Yeah, but I get them all the time. It's so frequent. Like, it's mad. Wait. Here we go. Oh, I do think I found one. Yeah, there's one here from, like, literally, when is this? This is December. So for listeners, we're in January, Chris and I recording this. The last one I got other than this YouTube comment was literally like 3 weeks ago. So it's just the fact that a thing I said literally years ago now comes back as frequently as it does is mind melting. And I stand by it.
What does the comment say? What does that one from December say?
It was similar. It was just like, oh, here's some footage and pictures of a water drill, and it's like they've sent a video, the YouTube link, that's to a drilling through steel, like a water drill. It like sprays like really high pressure water. And I'm like, it's not what happens in the show.
It isn't particularly quick at the show.
No, the water they pass the water back at like, I don't know, not even a meter a second. It's just it just sort of comes forward about like the tide, like as if the water in the tide can cut through steel. Like it's so strange. If they sort of showed them like spinning it around like a blade, then I'd be sure, that's the kind of speed we're talking about. It's not what happens. Anyway, moving on from that frustration. That never-ending frustration. And look, I do jest. Like I really don't mind that much, but like it is very funny that it's still coming up. So I really enjoy playing into it. That's everything for this week, everyone. You can catch us in all the usual places, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic if you wish to support us with money. That way you get access to episodes a week early, so if you want to hear the finale right now and see what user comment has riled me up next week, you can hear it immediately. Or, gives you access to other stuff, like our podcast, Nothing But Lyrics, which is a special podcast that just exists for us to make fun of song lyrics. Or week early episodes of our other podcast, Rewind Reviews, and of course access to our Discord, where you can also ask a comment and then be berated on the podcast. Also, you can head over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingButStaticUK, where you can again help us out by engaging and leaving comments, and that obviously or subscribing or liking, and you can do that across any podcast platform you stumble across. You're free to tell a friend. That also helps. If you have a friend who likes Avatar and you think they might enjoy this, then please do nudge them along. But as I said last week, just lie. Tell them we're a podcast about tell them we're a podcast about bakery or something. We appreciate all lying. Also, of course, support Raphodraws. That's Instagram.com/Raphodraws. RAPHODRAWS. Rapho did the art that is the key art for this podcast. If I'm suddenly talking a bit louder, it's because the bin men have decided to pull up outside of our property and are making a lot of noise. Do I wait for them to go? Do I wait for them to move on? It seems pretty loud.
I can't hear it, but it doesn't mean it's not loud.
Yeah, they're gone now. Okay, fine. So you can support Rapho. Rapho does that key art, and it's very good. Rapho has a store where you can buy all sorts of Rapho's art. I say they have a store. It's like a Redbubble account where you can buy lots of their stuff on various bits of merch. But even just going over and like following on Instagram and YouTube and all their different socials would be a nice way to sort of thank them for allowing us to use that art free of charge. It's very nice of them. That's everything for this week. It's been very exciting. I've just noticed, Chris, we haven't added anyone to the Knobhead Hall of Fame this week, or this year. Running out of time.
That's all right. It's not, it's a fluid thing. It's not. We don't need to do that every year.
You know what's funny is we very consistently added 2 people a year. So, 2 people season 1, 2 people season 2, 2 people season 3, 2 people season 4, aka season 1 of Korra. And then we only added 1 last year, which is just the writers for doing Asami dirty. Hashtag justice for Asami.
Hashtag justice for Asami.
Hashtag justice for Asami. But we haven't, we haven't covered any of the characters, so just keep an eye out. We never know. We might find some additions for this week. It'd be nice to have at least 1 this season. But I'm not going to force it. If we don't find anyone, we don't find anyone.
Let's keep an eye out for some knobheads next week then.
Yeah, absolutely. Other than us, obviously, we don't count.
Yeah. Could knobhead get us demonetized? Probably.
Could what? Sorry.
Knobhead get us demonetized? Probably.
Maybe. I don't know. We've lost that fight this week. We lost that fight already, sadly. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening. We love you. Enjoy your lives. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to review the final episode of this season of Korra, Venom of the Red Lotus.